Whakalavalei atu and welcome back to Pacific Mornings with Aggie here on 5:31 p.m. I'm sitting at 14 minutes past 7 o'clock. There is a new initiative. It is called Tu'u Mālohi, which pretty much aims to support Pacific learners to identify racism, build resilience and learn skills and strategies to minimize its impact on their well-being. So, of course, we are joined now this morning by none other than, of course, representative of Tu'u Mālohi. It is Mark Tulia. And with that, I say malole soifu and welcome to the show this morning.
Tai amanuia ma le soifua maua I le paia ma le mamalu le au whaafonga o te whaatalofa ma whaafeiloa I atu I le ava ma le mi ngao e tau iai o tau sā ma whai ngā ia tūlou o le ale o iai so uleo ma lo e le lei ki orana whakalofa lahi atu talo hani Māori Nisa Pula hala o la keta and warm Pacific greetings to all our listeners this morning, especially to you, our host, Agnes, and the team at 531 PI and the Pacific Media Network. Thank you for the opportunity.
Love. No, thank you very much, Mark. Of course, it is our privilege to have you on the show this morning. It's definitely an important tala noa, and I like even just listening to the fact of what the initiative is wanting to do. So, to those who have never heard of it before, though, Mark, what is Tu'u Mālohi all about, even besides the intro that I gave?
So Tu'u Mālohi is the Ministry of Education's response to supporting and strengthening our Pacific wellbeing for our learners, our parents, our families and our communities by providing an opportunity to understand and to identify racism. So often we experience it, but sometimes we're unable to describe what it is or to label it and call it out as it is. And so this program, Tu'u Mālohi, has been designed for our learners, but also our parents and families to walk alongside to learn skills and strategies that will hopefully minimize the impact of these continue to be lived experience for our Pacific young people and our Pacific families. Tu'u Mālohi also provides a talanoa or a talanoanga session for schools in the specific Pacific communities that it rolls out in. So this will be to build on their understanding and critical consciousness around cultural bias and racism in the school context. So there are 4 themes, or what we like to call BOL, that hold up the program. These were identified by Pacific Expert Talanoa Group and will form the key focus areas for Tu'u Mālohi. They are racism, so identifying an awareness and strategies to combat Pacific values as a source of resilience around who are we, and identity, so the migration narrative, which we believe is really important for our young people to understand where they come from, the Pacific diaspora, and then owning our own narratives. And finally, career pathways and goal setting. So our ability to dream like our ancestors did many, many years ago to go out and navigate the seas of change and eventually turn up here in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Mark, that sounds like a lot that is going to happen within, of course, this initiative. There obviously is a need for it because we, sometimes our Pacific communities, right, we're overrepresented in these type of issues. But the need for it, though, what is it that you had seen, or was there a bit of research that you guys had done to actually create Tu'u Mālohi?
So I guess the setting that this program has come about is obviously the impact of COVID has accelerated and highlighted even further some of the inequities that our Pacific learners are experiencing. As that's been occurring, the ministry has had for a number of years a Pacific Education Plan, which has now been relaunched as the ministry's Action Plan for Pacific Education, 2020 to 2030. And this includes an area where there's a focus specifically on cultural bias and racism. And the blurb in our document is to confront systemic racism and discrimination in education. So it sets it out really clearly. And so the development of Tu'u Mālohi is around addressing cultural bias and racism experienced by our Pacific learners, parents, families,
Wow.
and the communities within the education system, because there's already other work happening in that racism equity space through other sectors such as
Mm.
health, social services. So this is something that's coming from the education space.
Wow.
These Pacific Wellbeing initiatives will be part of the ministry's strategy for Pacific education, and it also aligns with the Ministry of Pacific Peoples, the Langa 4 priority goals, which links to Goal 4, thriving and resilient Pacific young people.
Mm, mm. Of course, I know when I hear Tu'u Mālohi, right, from my Tongan background, that would say stand strong, right? So uh, to name it that and know, of course, we constantly are experiencing some type of level of racism here in Aotearoa. But how different, though, is this initiative to any other sort of organisation that might be doing things already in this well-being space?
It's a great
Mm,
question. The cultural bias and the racism that's experienced by Pacific learners, parents, families isn't something new.
mm,
We've sat down and talked to our young people, and probably the saddest thing is that uh, as adults ourselves, the experiences that we encountered, a few years
yeah.
ago
Mm,
is still relevant today. The things that have been in place, the other programs, initiatives, policies, nothing's really shifted in that
mm,
space. And so this program, Tu'u Mālohi, standing strong, setting those strong foundations, is around, it's coming at it from another perspective. How can we strengthen our children's resiliency so that they can overcome the challenges that they experience in their school? But it's not just school, because they experience it on the sports field, they experience it in the workplace, in their part-time jobs, any facet of their life.
yeah.
And so Tu'u Mālohi looks to come at it from a different angle, where
Mm,
rather than trying to address the workforce, which there are already initiatives happening, the ministry is already funding a wide range of programs and initiatives to build teacher capability and competency.
mm,
But for our learners, how do they manage the day to day while that other stuff is happening in alongside it? So, Tu'u Mālohi is seen as being different in that it
mm,
is working with our young people, building their skills and their capability, but alongside the children, our young people are the parents.
mm,
Our parents are our biggest cheerleaders. They're our first teachers. We hear all the research
yeah.
around an engaged parent in a child's education has more significant impact in many other
Mm,
areas within that. So having our parents equipped and being able to support that conversation alongside their young person during these experiences will
yeah.
strengthen how our children deal with those situations, but also minimizes the impact. Because often, from my own experience, when as a father, when my children have come home, often
Yeah.
it's like just ignore it, or build a bridge. That's their problem. But often, what our children are wanting to hear is that we're hearing them.
Mm,
And so, this program, as well as supporting our children and our young people, also supports our parents to be able to engage in stronger conversations with their young person.
I like that.
Another aspect of the program that's different to others is that often we work in the education space with just educators. So there is a
Mm,
component of that in the program, but we've also brought in expertise in the form of social services specialists. So your counsellors, youth workers, you may have access to a clinical psychologist, educational clinician, or a social worker in school that can be part of the program to provide that expert advice around the well-being and mental health as well
wow.
as part of the program.
Sounds really much, very much a one stop shop type of thing, the initiative. I mean, who else, though, Mark, is actually going to stand to benefit from the Tu'u Mālohi program?
So for the Tu'u as well as the learners and parents, there is a component, there are sessions built into it
Mm,
to also bring our educators, so our school teachers, our school leaders, and educational professionals to be part of the program.
yeah.
So in essence, there'll be a bit of professional learning and development as part of the program, so that there is a space for our young people and our parents to be able to engage with those educators and be able to tell their narrative, because often that space isn't accorded to our learners and to parents in this sort of conversation. So
Yeah.
that will work alongside other initiatives already happening, like I mentioned, that the ministry funds, such as Tapasa, which is a cultural competency
Yes, yes, I've heard.
a
Yeah.
framework for teachers
Mm,
and for school leaders. So this is coming at it where we're actually bringing our parents
mm,
and our Pacific young people to be able to not educate, but just strengthen the practices that happens within schools. So um, a big benefit of this program will be the impact on our educators that are day to
mm.
day in front of our young people
Yeah.
and teaching them and engaging and interacting with them.
I do. You keep talking about the fact that it seems to be a very much the whole whānau, right? That parents are going to be involved, which I'm a big advocate for. The fact that we are, yes, like you said, the first teachers for our children. If there is anyone that's probably listening in right now, though, Mark, where are the locations so that this program will be available to?
So Tu'u Mālohi is in a pilot phase,
Mm.
and so the locations are currently across the country, with 4 locations in Auckland. So we have a central Auckland program, one running in West Auckland, and 2 running in South Auckland.
Mm.
We also have 2 each in Wellington and Christchurch, and 1 each in
Wow.
Palmerston North and Blenheim.
Nice. So obviously in its pilot phase, once it's done, is that then are you saying the possibility of it having to grow and reach other regions?
That is the intention, that
Mm.
Tu'u Mālohi will be ongoing. Like anything, we need to follow through a process
Yeah.
as a government organisation. Following the end of this round of programs, Tu'u Mālohi will go through a rigorous evaluation process, and then then we will seek further funding
Nice.
to look at scaling up what has worked for our young people and our
Mm.
Pacific families.
Like it.
Um, uh, in addition, the reason why we've chosen those locations is that with the funding that we're currently allocated,
Mm.
we wanted to target our largest urban regions, as our data says. This is where the majority of our Pacific sit. But we also wanted to look at our communities that are established and growing in our
Mm.
smaller regions, hence Palmerston North and Blenheim being in there.
Mm.
We
Oh,
would have loved to
yeah.
have had funding to roll it out across the country in all areas, but
Yeah.
that's what we're
Working
that's the
towards
area
too.
that we're in.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Mark, to maybe possibly make this conversation a little bit more personable, right? Because obviously you have dealt with children who, on a daily basis, possibly are experiencing racism and how to even deal with that. I think you even mentioned just a little bit there around your kids when they've come home. If you are in this program, I can hear you've got counsellors, student leaders, youth workers, and all that. But to someone who's probably come, what's maybe a scenario that you have experienced and you've been able to speak into someone's life in regards to dealing with racism? I mean, what's sort of the first type of advice you would give a child if they were experiencing this?
That's a great question. One of the strategies is around uh, um, restorative conversations.
Yeah.
And so, if a young person, whether it be a student that I was teaching or my own child
Mm,
or a relative, my first comment would be around, so who have you spoken to at school about this?
mm,
Have you raised it? And then I guess my response from then moving forward would then be, so if they haven't been heard, what can I, as a parent or as an
mm,
adult in this young person's life, do to support them in restoring their mana and
mm,
in making sure that the other child is kept safe in that whole process.
yeah.
Racism is a hard thing, and so when we
Mm,
talk about it with how kids respond, normally it's with anger, it's with disengagement. So often we see statistics where our kids leave school,
mm,
or there's what we have labelled behaviour issues, when actually, when you delve down, it's these encounters that our young people have, whether it be other students or even with the teacher, that they're engaging with.
Uh, if you're tuning in, we are catching up with the course representative from the Tu'u Mālohi program, Mark Tulia. Mark, I want to ask though, is Tu'u Mālohi like a one-off? Like that's, if someone was to come with you, deal with your situation, that's it? Or do you actually journey with the child for however long?
So Tu'u Mālohi was designed to be, to not be a one-off program. So we've built into it. So there are a total of 11 sessions, and of that, 8 of them will be the workshops that the young people and their parents and the school leaders are involved in, where they'll engage, learn those skills, learn those strategies. An additional 3 sessions are what we've labelled Talanoa circles, and this is an opportunity post the program to come and meet with the specialist social services. So it might be the social worker or the youth counsellor, to just check in, have a space where the young people can feed back how things have gone after they've been involved in the program. There's also an opportunity, having those specialist services part of the program, for them to perhaps identify needs during it, and being able to direct our young people and their families to appropriate support that
Yeah.
might not be within the scope of the program. So, for example, if there's um, a disclosure around a particular issue, and it needs this type of response, those services will be able to triage in a sense,
Yes.
and guide those families or that young person to those areas. Also built into the program is a privacy element,
Yeah.
because we're aware that our young people sometimes require that additional support. So, anything that's shared within the program is done in confidence, and worked through as whatever issues are raised.
Mark, is there any? You're talking about that, of course, is the different types of support. Who are the? Is there any other providers that you are actually sort of collaborating with in regards to Tu'u Mālohi?
Yeah, so the program is actually being funded by the ministry, but being
Yes.
delivered by a number of community organisations, or organisations that have really strong Pacific capability or staff
Yeah.
within their workforce. So for Tu'u Mālohi, we have partnered with Affirming Works, Skills
Nice.
Update New Zealand, Core Education, Vasa Consulting, Massey University,
Wow.
Kalia Trust, and Cross Pollinate in Canterbury. So they're quite a diverse group with some really experienced providers, and then some grassroots community providers to give us a good, I guess, test of the program and its implementation, so that we can make it better.
Nice. And what specifically will your role be within this program?
So my role within the program is to provide support and advice to those providers, in regards to ensuring that they meet their outcomes. So I guess in a sense, kind of program manager.
Yeah. Love it, love it. If there was any opportunity for someone who would want to actually, jump onto the program, how would they go about that and how would they even get in touch with you guys?
If they contact our email address, talanoa@education.govt.nz, we would be able to connect them with the local provider that's in one of those regions that I noted, one of those locations, and they can follow up on registration. So we've funded it for 30 young people per program.
Okay.
So there is a cap on the spaces, but that'd be something that families can chat to those providers around their capacity, and whether there's space there for them. I
Nice.
visited one of the first ones that happened a couple of days ago, and I sat in one of the parent sessions, and exactly why we designed this program came out in the
Yeah.
comment from a parent around they would often ignore or downplay the racism that their child
Mm.
encountered. But having done this program, they've seen the impact that they didn't realize was under the surface.
Wow.
And so, I mean, all I can say to parents who are listening today is to encourage them to listen, to
Mm.
hear their children, and if they're able to sign up to any of the program locations, it would be a worthwhile
Mm. Mm. You
experience to be involved in.
You saying there, Mark, obviously it's only capped at about 30. Is there then maybe a little bit of criteria, though, that someone would then be accepted into the program? I mean, how far does your level of what type of racism you've experienced, is that what plays into who goes on to the program?
So that we've left that part to
Mm.
the flexibility of our providers, so they would
Okay.
identify who they
Mm.
would believe is a priority
Yeah.
learner to be on the program.
Mm.
Being a new program, our hope is that by socializing it through, like the program here, 531 PI,
Yeah.
will help build uh, a knowing of
Yeah.
this, and when we do scale it up, we
Mm.
will have additional spaces to cater for the demand.
Nice. I absolutely think this initiative is going to go off. I think, of course, the way you're approaching it, the way that it's even sort of, Pasifika led, I think that's going to speak volumes into the children that possibly will jump onto this program, even with their family and whānau.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, though, Mark, I'd love to know what's maybe just your key message for today that you'd actually like to get out to our community of listeners today who may be tuning in and thinking, this might be something for my child and for my family.
I guess the final message would be that um, when we design this and we put this in front of a group of experts, so this is Pacific Health, this is Pacific Social Services, this is
Mm.
Pacific educators and academics. We coined the phrase as cultural bias and racism to soften and make it a bit more palatable for the wider audience, wider
Mm.
community.
Mm.
But we were told, call it what it is. It's racism. The
Yeah.
more we use these softening vocabulary, the lesser
Mm.
the more we downplay what the experience is for our young people.
That's right.
And it's a different time. When we experienced this as young people ourselves many years ago, we talked about just ignoring it.
Mm.
Whaamalosi, just be strong about it.
Yeah.
It's not the same for our young people now. It's about us coming alongside them, listening listening to the challenges that they are facing and providing support and advice. And if you don't have that support and advice as a parent,
Mm.
ask, because we've got so many resources in the wider community.
Nice.
You've got community leaders, we've got the Pacific services that are available
Yeah.
in our different areas
Mm.
that can wrap around and help.
Beautiful. Mark, look, we just want to say a big whakataitere lava for your time this morning. A really valuable insight into this, and I hope that we can obviously carry this talanoa on. But again, we just thank you for your time and all the best for the new program, Tu'u Mālohi.
Malo Obito Fifte Tele Lava Agnes for the opportunity to share again, and a big shout out to the Pacific Media Network and 531 PI.
No worries. That, of course, is Mark Tulia from this new initiative that you've just been listening to, Tu'u Mālohi. It is aiming to support our Pacific learners to identify racism, build resilience, and learn those skills and strategies to minimise its impact on their well-being. Love, love, love. Head to our 531 PI Facebook page if you missed it. Well, let's head back to some music. So fitting. This is Sweetbox. It's Everything's Gonna Be Alright right here on 531 PI. Good morning.
531 PI, bringing Pacific people together.
Everything's gonna